Hi, Jose Della Portilla here with HVAC Learning Solutions. Thanks for tuning in to Toolbox Tuesday. Today we have an honor to have Aaron Alfaro with his Parker Sporlan ZoomLock braze-free fittings here to demonstrate and to show us the ZoomLock system. So Aaron, if you would, why don't you show us what comes with the kit as we unbox this and tell us a little bit about each part that's in that setup.
So this is the ZoomLock toolkit. This is a sample kit that we have available. The actual kit will come with 5 jaws. Right now we have 3 jaws or line sizes. The full 5-jaw kit comes with 3/8, ½ inch, 5/8, 7/8, and 1 1/8.
So basically the standard kit comes with almost every jaw size they need, but if they're working on something different like a mini split or a more commercial product, can they buy accessory jaws individually?
They can. So all the jaws are the same price. There's 9 jaws available total from 1/4 inch up to 1 3/8.
Well, why don't you show us one of these jaws and then show us what else comes in the kit?
Sure. So for example, this is a 7/8 jaw. We have it labeled 7/8 right here. So this is the jaw for 7/8 line sizes. And if we go to the tool, this shows you it has the pin right here. This is the locking pin that allows you to connect the jaw onto the tool. So as we unlock the pin, we're able to put the jaw onto the tool and pop it right in, and you're ready to go.
Now, you had mentioned something to me before about the force that this tool generates. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yep, so this is a 19 kilonewton tool, and that translates to over 4,000 pounds of force as far as the crimping force that the tool is applying to the fitting.
So essentially, when we put a fitting in, we can rest assured that we're getting about 4,000 pounds of pressure compressing this fitting together to make a leak-free fitting that can stand under the pressure of the refrigeration system.
Exactly, and that's what's needed when we're dealing with high pressures of HVAC and refrigeration.
Great. Now, as you have that tool in your hand, I want to ask you something about that battery. Yep. I recognize the name on that battery. Can you tell us a little bit about that battery and why ZoomLock chose that battery?
So the battery that the ZoomLock tool comes with is the Makita battery. It's an 18-volt battery, a common battery that's used in a lot of power tools. You can do about 150 crimps on one charge. And what's nice about the ZoomLock toolkit is that it comes with 2 batteries. So as you go through a whole charge of one battery, you don't have to wait around to wait for it to charge. If you have a large job, you can just swap it out and put the other one back on the charger.
That's great. Let's see these. So this is our standard Makita battery, so I could go to pretty much any home improvement store if I needed extra batteries on the fly and grab one.
Exactly.
And it looks like it even comes with its own charger.
It does. So it comes with the Makita charger, and the charger charges a dead battery in 15 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah.
So even if they are on a big commercial job running VRF lines or mini splits or long line sets, they can put one on, use the tool while the other one's charging in 15 minutes and be ready to go.
Exactly.
Incredible. And if they've got other Makita tools, they've probably already got the batteries in the charger.
That's exactly right.
Okay. Well, what else comes with the kit? Show us what they are and what they do for us.
So besides the 2 batteries and the battery charger, we also give you a couple accessories. So when you're connecting tubing, you need a tube cutter, a deburring tool, and we have a really nice deburring tool. It's got a lot of teeth for the outside of the tubing as well as the inside of the tubing.
Now with this deburring tool, this is probably, guys, this is my favorite style of deburring tool because they get the best clean fitting. But what I would recommend is, if possible, when you're going to deburr, try to deburr in a downward angle because you're going to see shavings and debris that can fall right out. And we want to keep that out of our pipe. So is that a good recommendation to deburr away?
That's a very good point.
Instead of like this? Try to get your fitting and your deburring tool on like this so the debris doesn't go back into your system. And this one's really great, like Aaron's saying, because it deburrs the inside and the outside. And is it safe to say that the successful man or the key to success in ZoomLock is all in the preparation?
It's all about prep. We do have an O-ring in the fitting, so you definitely do not want to cut that O-ring because that is the seal, the refrigerant seal. So this is why we give you a really nice deburring tool, and as well as an abrasive pad. So once you've done the deburring, you can clean up the piping or the tubing to get it nice and ready for a crimp.
So basically, the prep work isn't anything different than what we already should be doing with our refrigeration system.
Exactly. So it's pretty simple as far as the process for brazing but it's definitely important for ZoomLock.
Awesome. So what else is in this kit?
So a couple more accessories. We have a metal brush to get any kind of fine shavings, to brush off any kind of fine shavings, as well as a marker and a couple of gauges here. So the first gauge we'll talk about is the depth gauge. And this allows you to measure how far the tubing will go into the fitting, which is very important because we need to make sure we insert the tubing past the O-ring, the built-in O-ring of the ZoomLock fitting.
So we just kind of hold this up to the size that we need and draw a black line, and that's where we know that fitting needs to stop at?
Exactly. So for example, for a 3/8 fitting, and you make your mark right there. So now we have a mark to tell us how far we need to go into the fitting. That ensures us that we're going past the O-ring.
Now there is also an accessory depth gauge that I found that I kind of like a little bit more myself, but it's all up to preference. So can you show us how this depth gauge works?
Yes, this is an optional depth gauge that you can buy separately. And it does the same thing, but it's just a little easier. You insert your tube, make your mark the same way, and you're ready to go to slide right into the ZoomLock fitting.
Okay, so with our ZoomLock kit, we've got the jaws, we've got the batteries, we've got the charger, we've got the depth gauge, we've got the brush, the marker, and the Scotch-Brite to clean up the fitting. So now what we need to do is talk about the actual fittings themselves. So what I love to show you here is if you look at these O-rings through the crimp process, it's pinched all the way down, it fills the gap, so we know we have a leak-free fitting. Now from what I understand, these fittings here, this specific fitting is rated for most of your refrigerants with the exception of R22. Any of your refrigerants that contain chlorine, the chlorine could affect the seal, but you guys have your own line of approved fittings for chlorine-based refrigerants still.
Correct. We do have a limited amount of ZoomLock fittings that are R22 compatible, but they're different than the standard ZoomLock fitting.
Okay, great, which really shouldn't be too much of an issue because there's not going to be much of this stuff available for in the near future. And the key thing is, we talked about this earlier, but the depth gauge. When we make those marks, it's actually critical to make the mark. Even though we have the dimple stop, still make the mark. That's going to make sure your warranty of the fitting and the tool is still intact. So make the marks to make sure you know where you're stopping at. Okay, Aaron, this looks like an amazing kit. Now the question that our audience is going to have is how easy is it to use? So would you be willing to do a demonstration of connecting a couple fittings together for us?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, so what do you want to try? You want to try 7/8? You want to try 3/8? Which one do you want to shoot for?
Let's do a 3/8.
All right, so here's the 3/8 pipe, and here's a couple 3/8 fittings. If you would, walk us through the entire process from hooking up the jaw, prepping the fitting, and then making the crimp itself.
Sure thing. So we're using 3/8. We're going to need to use a 3/8 jaw. At the moment, you can see that our ZoomLock tool has a 7/8 jaw on there. So we will need to change the jaw to 3/8.
And that's as simple as pulling that pin, right?
Exactly. Here's the pin button right here. To pop it out, remove the jaw. And over here, I have the 3/8 jaw right here. And you can see that it's marked with 3/8 on the side. Pop the jaw onto the tool and put the pin right in there. Now you're ready to go for 3/8.
Okay, so let's talk about prepping the fitting. Why don't you show us what we need to do to prep that copper?
So copper prep is definitely important. The main thing is to make sure we deburr and clean up the fitting or the tubing before we go into the fitting. So first step is we're going to want to use our deburring tool that the tool kit comes with. Deburr the inside and outside of the tubing.
And again, the reason for getting rid of those burrs is we don't want anything that could run the risk of nicking our O-ring and creating a potential leak.
Exactly. That O-ring is the seal, the refrigerant seal, so we want to make sure there's nothing that will cut that O-ring.
Now sometimes, guys, we get a little lackadaisical and we don't like to clean the fitting.
Yeah.
Right? But it's the same thing here. The cleaner the fitting, the easier the connection.
Yep.
So can you show us how easy it is to get that fitting with that Scotch-Brite and the difference it makes in the color of the pipe alone?
Exactly. Once we deburr the fitting or the tubing, we're going to want to clean that up with our Scotch-Brite abrasive pad. And this allows you to kind of clean up in case there's any kind of dirt or debris that's on the tubing. Make it a nice clean connection when we get it, when we insert it into the fitting.
So let's just take a look at this. This is a new roll of 3/8 copper right out of the box. notice how much cleaner the Scotch-Brited area is. And again, the key to success is the prep. So with the deburring, both inside and outside, and the cleaning the fitting, we can be comfortable that there's no contaminants that are going to get into our system or create a leak.
Exactly.
Okay, great.
Once we've deburred and cleaned up the tubing, we're ready to make our mark, our insertion depth mark.
Okay. So you've got your depth gauge, we've got this additional depth gauge. Why don't you show us how to do it with both depth gauges so the guys can see their options?
So this is the optional depth gauge that's available. So once we insert it into the depth gauge, we make our mark. And now we know how far to go into the ZoomLock fitting.
Okay. And show us again, if you would, how easy it is to do it with the standard depth gauge in case they don't want to get the optional one.
Right, and this is the standard depth gauge that comes in every ZoomLock toolkit. So first off, we find the line size that we're dealing with. For this example, we're dealing with 3/8 connection size. We pop it in, and we find this horizontal line, and we make our mark. And you'll notice it matches the same mark as our other depth gauge had.
So really the depth gauge is all about your personal preference.
Exactly.
Awesome.
So now we've made our mark and we're ready to do a crimp.
All right, let's go for it.
So we have a ZoomLock 3/8 coupling right here. And you'll notice as I rotate the coupling, you'll see the little dimple stop, and that will stop the tubing from going too far into the fitting. Now, one of the main reasons why we make a mark on our tubing is because of that O-ring that's here. A lot of times when you insert it, you feel the resistance of the O-ring, and you may think that that is as far as you need to go. But in order for ZoomLock to work properly, you have to go past the O-ring. So as long as you line it up right with that mark, you had just ensured yourself that you've gone past the O-ring and it's ready for a successful crimp.
Awesome. Now when we do the crimp, for those people who are familiar with ProPress for plumbing side of things, the jaw's a little bit different in the way you place the fitting, correct?
Correct. With ProPress, as we move over to the tool, ProPress wants you to line up the O-ring in the middle of the jaw. ZoomLock wants it on the side. So I'll show you as I open the jaw, you'll notice it has a couple grooves here, which will fit the O-ring and the flare on the outside.
Great. So if they were to try to center it, they're not going to be very successful.
Exactly. This would not, you can kind of tell that it's not really fitting correctly because ZoomLock requires the O-ring to be on the side as it is here.
Okay, so we've got the fitting in the jaw. Why don't we just show the audience how easy it is to make the actual fitting?
Sure. And the beauty of ZoomLock, it's a 10-second connection for the entire fitting, 5 seconds on each side. So as we hit the button, we're just going to hold the button down until the tool completes the cycle. So now that we've done a crimp, the last step is to use our crimp gauge. And this allows us to find the line size that we're working with and apply this to each crimp. ZoomLock does a double crimp on each side. So we want to apply this to the crimp and make sure the crimp gauge is able to go into the crimp bands.
So what this has proven is that the crimp went all the way down and made a solid crimp.
Exactly.
And if we didn't make a solid connection for one reason or another, we can always put the fitting right back in and crimp again until that crimp gauge meets the spot.
Exactly. You can always re-crimp if you need to, although ZoomLock tool is designed to only have to do it once.
Great. But if for some reason there was an error, we've got the crimp gauge to prove that it's right or wrong, and then we can hit it again a second time if we need to.
Exactly.
Okay, great. Now I want to show the audience the variety of fittings that are available for ZoomLock. So I'm picturing a residential install coming straight off the service valve. And then we need to make a turn to go up inside the wall. So does ZoomLock have 90-degree fittings for these setups?
We do. We have long radius 90s. I believe we have one right here. So this is our ZoomLock 90, and it's the same process as the regular couplings. And I don't know if you want to do another one?
Yeah, let's do another one. Let's show them how to connect it.
So again, before we can insert our tubing into a ZoomLock fitting, we have to prep the tubing. So first off, we're going to use our deburring tool that comes with the ZoomLock toolkit. Right now we're deburring the outside of the tubing. Flip it over and we can deburr the inside of the tubing. Next step is to use our abrasive pad and clean up that fitting in case it's got any debris or dirt on the tubing.
Sure, because with enough temperature and pressure, that dirt and debris could knock loose and create a a less than perfect seal.
Exactly, and you can see the difference here.
Got it. And then you had said something about checking it for scratches. What's that?
Yep, that's another key point. We want to make sure there's no deep scratches where you can put your fingernail in, especially a horizontal scratch, because that could create a leak path to go under the O-ring of the fitting.
Sure, and even if we have a deep scratch and we're in the ZoomLock fitting, if that fitting splits, now we have a leak potential. So always examine your work, guys. It's all about the prep.
Yep, and if you do have a scratch, just cut that piece off and move further down the tubing.
Okay, so now we've got to mark it for the right depth, right?
Yep, so we're going to use our depth gauge. We have 3/8 connection, or 3/8 line size. We insert it into the depth gauge, and we can make our mark. This allows us to know how far we need to go into the ZoomLock fitting. So here's a 90, and we're going to insert it. As we insert it, we're going to feel the resistance of the O-ring.
So it's important not to stop when you feel the resistance. You've got to actually go past the O-ring.
Go past the O-ring until you line it up with the mark that you made. And that ensures that you go past the O-ring and we're ready to ZoomLock.
Okay, well let's go ahead and make that connection.
Sure. So here's our ZoomLock tool with our 3/8 head. We're going to line this right up. Again, we're using the O-ring on one side and the flare of the fitting on the other side. Once we have it lined up, we can hit the button and allow the tool to complete the cycle. So 5 seconds and you're done.
So in roughly 10 seconds, besides all of our chatter, we've made all the connections we need, and now we just verify it with the crimp gauge.
Exactly. So the crimp gauge is able to be applied to each band, so we know we have a complete crimp.
Awesome. Now, a couple other things that I had a question on is as we look at the tool here, I notice that the jaw rotates.
It does.
What's the purpose of the rotation?
That allows the customer to be able to apply ZoomLock tool in a tight space where you need to have a certain angle, and the tool allows you to rotate it 350 degrees.
So if I was coming down from a service valve and I had clearance down below, I can go this way, I can come up this way, or if I needed to rotate the jaw and the battery around, I can get it this way.
Exactly. So it allows you to help you to get your tool into the workspace that you're needed.
That's great. So now that we've seen what comes with the standard ZoomLock kit, from what I understand, Parker Sporlan makes a ton of accessories and fittings. So I'd like to show off a few things.
Sure.
The first thing I want to show off is this jaw right here. And Aaron, can you tell our audience what this is for?
Yep, this is the rigid jaw that we've made for the rigid tools. It's the compact ProPress rigid tool. So a lot of contractors do plumbing as well as HVAC work. So in the plumbing industry, they've had a similar tool for water lines that's been out there, which is the rigid ProPress tool. And we've come out with a line of jaws to fit that tool. Great. So if they already have the tool, all they have to do is buy the jaws and they're ready to ZoomLock.
So cost savings right up front. If they've already using it and they already know the policy, the procedures and the steps, simply get the jaws and then change where they line up their fitting.
Exactly.
Great. Now we've got a line and assortment of fittings here, and here we have a filter dryer. This is a Parker Sporlan filter dryer. Is this thing ZoomLock compatible?
This particular one is. You'll notice the label says ZoomLock compatible. Sporlan has come out with a lot of products that are ZoomLock compatible. For example, filter dryers, sight glasses, solenoid valves, and ball valves that are ZoomLock compatible. A lot of the standard valves have ODF by ODF connections, sweat connections. So to make them ZoomLock compatible, we've made the fittings extended, and now they're ODM by ODM, which is basically straight copper tubing, and allows you to apply a ZoomLock fitting onto the valves.
So we could connect to these ZoomLock approved fittings really easy to save time on the job.
Exactly. Just like it was a 10-second connection with our tubing, you can install these valves in 10 seconds without having to have a torch.
So what do we do if we already have a valve or a dryer that we don't know if it's ZoomLock compatible? Is there a rule of what it needs to be ZoomLock compatible?
Yep, you can pretty much connect anything as long as the stubs are between 1 1/4 up to 1.5 inches worth of stub out. Where if that has an ODF bell on the end, you can cut that bell off, And as long as you have between 1.25 inches to 1.5 inches worth of tubing sticking out, you can apply a ZoomLock fitting onto it.
And could I also use the depth gauge on whatever I'm putting in to make sure I've got that? If I didn't want to grab the tape measure, could I use, put the end of the dryer onto the depth gauge?
Exactly, and that will assure you that you do have enough room. So for example, we're using this one here, and we know we have enough room because this is the mark that we would need to use in order to put the ZoomLock fitting onto the dryer.
So the key is, even when it's ZoomLock compatible, still make the mark.
Yes, exactly, because we still want to ensure that we're going past the O-ring when we insert the tubing into the fitting.
Now, as we look at the accessories that ZoomLock has available, these caught my eye as well.
Yep, these are a unique addition to the ZoomLock line. They're flares on one side and ZoomLock on the other, which is a great fitting to have for mini splits, for example.
Absolutely, and time saving as well. Is if you're trying to make a flare fitting, you don't have to flare and then have a stub out and make another connection. So essentially I'm removing one more leak potential here by having the ZoomLock connection there instead of a copper fitting with a man-made flare, stub out, and a ZoomLock. Great. All right, well, thank you so much for taking the time to show us a little bit about ZoomLock. Is there anything else you want to tell our audience about ZoomLock and what it does for them?
Just go to zoomlock.com. You have all of our videos. We have a lot of testimonial videos. Our literature is on there, and we also have a ZoomLock Roadshow that's coming to a contractor near you throughout the country. There's 2 ZoomLock trucks that are going to different events throughout the country where you can go to the ZoomLock event and actually see it in person, and allows you to do crimps, do a couple crimps right on site. We also are offering a ZoomLock promotion where if you buy 350 ZoomLock couplings or fittings, we give you a free ZoomLock toolkit.
Pretty ingenious. So overall, really interesting tool. A lot of potential here. I want you to think about what this can do for your company. If you have folks who aren't as well trained on how to braze, you've got the ability to have a quick, easy connection. If you're concerned about contaminants in the system, such as needing to purge the lines with nitrogen so that you don't get oxidation in the line, this solves that problem. With the ability to connect it to the existing ProPress tool that's out there, if you've already got it set up, it's an easy tool to get into your truck. If you're looking to get into it, that program you talked about, Aaron, my 350 fittings, and the tool's yours. Think about the time it can save you, the callbacks it could save you, and the ability to get on and off the job quicker. Amazing tool by the folks at Parker Sporlan, and I want to thank Aaron for coming out today and giving us this show around. Thanks so much for tuning in to Toolbox Tuesday, and we'll catch you next time. If you have any comments or questions or concerns about the product, let us know below in the comments section, and this way we can get you paired up with somebody to help you with any questions you might have. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.